Welcome 339S. So for this recording, I'm going to look at our lesson on water as a symbol, and I will focus on Diving into the Wreck by Adrienne Rich, as well as Mermaid Meet by Brenda, Wong, Aoki. I also really recommend watching the video on kind of like Ghosts of the Titanic. It's a really good mood inspiration before you get into your writing exercise. Okay, so in looking at Diving into the Wreck, rereading this, I just realized what a wonderful piece it is. It has so much like surprise. It really gets into kind of the subconscious that can be submerged underwater. And water is such an important symbol in writing, in mythology, in film. It really like represents the submerged, right? The id, what is underneath, what memories we have that we kind of keep stuff down so that we can get by day to day. So it's all about all of that kind of we keep from coming to the surface, that's bubbling underneath our existence. And also the seashore, kind of the edge of the sea, is where the subconscious and the conscious meet, right? And in some of the other pieces that we looked at this semester, that is a theme that has come out, and it comes out in these two pieces that I will be looking at with you. So in Diving into the Wreck, Adrienne Rich is talking about something, and I kind of am interested in what you think it symbolizes. What is the wreck here symbolizing? I have my own interpretation of it. I feel that maybe it's looking at the wreckage of a broken relationship or some sort of fight, something that has happened in the past. It's kind of like diving into the past, but that's my interpretation. So let's read this together, and I'm going to talk about pieces as we read it. So first, having read the Book of Myths and loaded the camera and checked the edge of the knife blade, I put on the body armor of black rubber, the absurd flippers, the grave and awkward mask. So here it does a really interesting thing where she's kind of moving from myths into very specific concrete items, and ones that are really unexpected, right? You wouldn't initially think to put these together, and then you start kind of saying, okay, she's preparing for a dive, right? But she takes us in these really unexpected directions, and I love that throughout the piece. It kind of keeps you on the edge of your toes. I'm having to do this not like Cousteau with his assiduous team aboard the sun-flooded schooner, but here alone, right? So here I see that she is forced into dealing with the past on her own. She has nobody there to go through it with her. So she's kind of thinking of this as going on this exploration, this kind of dangerous exploration by herself. There's a ladder. The ladder is always there, hanging innocently, close to the side of the schooner. We know what it is for, we who have used it. Otherwise, it is a piece of maritime floss, some sundry equipment. Right? So here I think about her saying, we always have this ability to go back into memory. We have this ability to go back into things that are traumatic that have happened in our past, but we choose not to. Maybe to protect ourselves, maybe because it would just be so complicated, we try to avoid it, and that's kind of where the ladder is. I go down, rung after rung, and still the oxygen immerses me, the blue light, the clear atoms of our human air. I go down, my flippers cripple me, I crawl like an insect down the ladder. She's going down into memory. And there is no one to tell me when the ocean will begin, right? So here it's so fascinating that she's like diving into oxygen, okay? And thinking about human air and taking that with her into this kind of new environment. And then when she kind of says she feels crippled and she's crawling, right? So this is a really painful challenging experience. And I love that line where she says, there's no one to tell me when the ocean will begin, right? So she does not have guidance again. She's on her own, having to kind of figure this out. First the air is blue, and then it is bluer, and then green, and then black, and I'm blacking out. And yet my mask is powerful. It pumps my blood with power. The sea is another story. The sea is not a question of power. I have to learn alone to turn my body without force in the deep element. And so here she's also kind of blending ideas of diving into air and diving into the sea. And you're not quite sure, is she kind of going into the ocean as a foreign environment, or is she kind of diving into just the past and diving into oxygen? And is that overwhelming when she blacks out? And now it is easy to forget what I came for, among so many who have always lived here, swaying their crenellated fans between the reefs. And besides, you breathe differently down here, right? So that she's kind of like changed by this new environment. I came to explore the wreck. The words are purposes. The words are maps. I came to see the damage that was done and the treasures that prevail. I stroke the beam of my lamp slowly along the flank of something more permanent than fish or weed. So here she's taking and saying the words are kind of her framework, her map to find where she is. So probably memories of things that have been said in the past, trying to delve into those. And she wants to see the damage that was done by this event. The thing I came for, the wreck, and not the story of the wreck, the thing itself, and not the myth, the drowned face always staring toward the sun, the evidence of damage worn by salt and sway into this threadbare beauty, the ribs of the disaster, curving the assertion among the tentative haunters. Those lines are so vivid, right? The ribs of the disaster. And then she mentions it a couple times, the drowned face, right? So kind of like this death that is staring back, right? Whatever is left over. This is the place, and I am here, the mermaid whose dark hair streams black, the merman in his armored body. We circle silently about the wreck. We dive into the hold. I am she, I am he. So she's kind of blending herself with the other person. Everything's all kind of turned up together, and they've turned into mermaid, mermen here. Whose drowned face sleeps with open eyes, whose breasts still bear the stress, whose silver copper vermeil cargo lies, obscurely inside barrels, half wedged and left to rot. We are the half-destroyed instruments that once held to a course, the water-eaten log, the fouled compass. So she's using these really concrete images, these concrete objects, to kind of represent symbolically what each component of this memory means. Left to rot, right? Cargo lies obscurely inside barrels. So all of this like hidden, deep down, buried stuff. We are, I am, you are. By cowardice or courage, the one who find our way. Back to the scene, carrying a knife, a camera, a book of myths, in which our names do not appear. Right, so she's circling back to the beginning and saying these are the tools that she brought with her to kind of try and witness and deal with what she's going to find. And in this book of myths, their names do not appear, right? So this is so buried in the past that nobody knows about it. So this is really getting into kind of the subconscious, which I think like works so effectively in this piece. And it connects also with the Brenda Wong Aoki monologue. I'm not going to read it for you, but I want to cover a couple important things in that. There's also links to some James Joyce's piece about water. And so think about the symbolism in those as well. So Brenda Wong Aoki is a performer who worked a lot with mythology. and she used folklore as kind of the basis for her performances. So this mermaid meet piece is based on Japanese myth. I think it's called Yayoi Bikuni. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. So in this mythology, the idea of eating mermaid flesh creates immortality in somebody, right? And so, and especially like in a daughter, we'll look here in the piece. So in being cursed, like at first it can seem like, wow, immortality is a great thing. But here we see that it can become a curse because no one else is living, right? If any of you are like familiar with Highlander, that's also kind of a similar theme in that too. Okay, so in this story, it again is dealing with subconscious, right? And the sea and the mermaid representing human desire and id, right? So the id is kind of this sexuality and also kind of like just aggressiveness, right? Just all of the human base behaviors that exist before kind of the ego and the superego say, hey, you know what, maybe that wouldn't be a good thing to do, right? This is people acting on their impulses and not thinking about consequences, right? And just saying, this is just what I want in this moment and wanting it satisfied. So this man is a fisherman. He goes out and he pulls this mermaid from the sea, right? And at first they get into this big kind of struggle. She's very strong, right? And then they both kind of become intoxicated with one another. She's intoxicated with his scent, with his earthiness, right? His roughness. He is drawn into her ethereal qualities, what the sea can promise, right? This opportunity, this difference, right? And it's funny when he pulls her in, it's like, but wait, it wasn't a fish. Well, it was a fish, but it was also a woman. So in this section, in the passion section, they kind of fall in love with each other's difference and each other's mysteriousness. They have this kind of tryst on the boat itself. She's obsessed with the smell of him, like I mentioned. They embrace and give themselves over to this physical passion. Okay, this is like the desires of the sea kind of bringing this out, and it's all coming to the surface. In the deed, we kind of get introduced to the myth that eating mermaid flesh can lead to immortality, right? Being young forever, specifically. So that's kind of giving us an inkling of what might happen. So he asked her he's in love with her, he asked her to come home with him for a day. And she bonds immediately with the daughter and gives her like this comb of pearl and coral, right? And then she's like, I have to return to the sea. If I don't return now, I'm going to be stuck, right? But the daughter like loves her and says, but the sea took mama and now the sea gave us you, and just throws her arms around her. And so she's like, well, this is fate, I'm going to stay. And she raises the daughter as her own. Now, over time, the man grows old, the daughter grows up, and they're kind of thriving based on having her there, but the mermaid is suffering, right? Her tail's growing dull, her skin is pale and dry, and occasionally at night she'll hear these calls from the sea, like her sisters are calling out, mourning for her, a keening meaning mourning, from the heart of the sea. But then she looks at this family she has on land and thinks, well, this is only temporary. I can do this for a little while. I love them, right? And then the daughter is aging and looks at her mother, right, the mermaid, her surrogate mother. And it's like, why don't you age, right? And so we can see kind of the id cropping up again. And she kind of has this desire to preserve herself. And so one evening, when the dad is asleep, the daughter cuts into the mermaid's back, right? Literally stabbing her in the back. Cuts out this flesh and eats it. She wants to preserve herself and be young forever. So, the mermaid mother now is damaged, and the sea turtle comes out of the sea, grabs her, and takes her back to protect her, right? In the section, the price, the daughter is now stuck, right? She has forced to live forever. So everyone that she's loved has grown old and died. She had children, they grew old and died. She's all alone, right, for hundreds of years. I think in one of the original stories, like 800 years or something, right? So imagine everything is gone. She's still wearing this comb of coral and pearl, and she keeps trying to harm herself because she knows she's not going to die. So it's like this pain that she keeps putting herself through and cutting open her wounds and spurting blood everywhere, right? And then she has this own short, this monologue about her situation. In the forgiveness section, then, the sea turtle appears, and the mermaid is now on her back, and the daughter's just begging to die. She's like, please relieve me of this, right? And asks for forgiveness. And the mermaid, it's in this piece, it says, then the mermaid looked at the woman who she'd once considered her very own daughter, the daughter who had wounded her so deeply, and beheld a woman of scars, just like herself. Right? So she's seeing herself in her. And so she tells her, I can't grant you death, but I can sing the song of forgiveness and healing, right? She sings to her, offers her healing. And then this big tsunami, right, comes, consumes the woman, takes all of her family's graves with it out to the sea and washes everything clean, right? So it's kind of like she's disappears into the ocean. And the end of the piece, this pine tree grows in its place where she had been. It says, a pine made all the more beautiful for its gnarls and scars. And the pine remains by the sea, by the source, by the place of the beginning, evermore, evergreen. So it's kind of like this permanence and renewal. And out of pain can come a lot of strength and depth, right? So I think that's kind of what she's trying to take from the story, that like painful things can happen, we can make mistakes, but it makes us more sturdy in the end, right? So I would recommend reading each of these pieces over again, watching The Ghost of the Titanic. I just really love the kind of eerie past quality of this little short film. It's just a few minutes. And in this writing exercise, what I would like you to do is think about water as a symbol. Okay, water is often used in writing to symbolize the subconscious, the id, the unknown, buried desires, sexuality, whatever it may be. It's kind of containing all of this underneath, right? So write a poem or a story that employs water as a representation of something else. Use your creativity and think about what can be kind of buried underneath. Okay, thank you.